How's it going, everyone? I am Jeremy Alexander, and welcome back to another top-down shooter racing game video. In this video, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be making our traffic control and our enemy AI. Now, this is actually interesting because I haven't done a lot of the pathfinding behavior until this. I mean, I messed around with it before, but this was really what clicked for me and what made it work. And as soon as I got a handle on it, it opens up a new realm of possibilities when it comes to doing AI, when it comes to doing paths. So it's really cool, and I'm excited to show it to you. What we're going to do is we're going to double click and make a new sprite. We're going to put this on the traffic layer in a second. Let's make this 64 by 64 to just kind of coincide with our tiles. Let's call this our object waypoint, and let's give this an ID of inst waypoint ID. Then what we want to do is we want to grab this. We want to make sure it's snapping to the grid. And even, actually, you know what? Let's put this to the top left. That way we can actually snap it to the tile. So let's put that there. Let's grab this, control click all the way down. Actually, before I do that, let's move this to the traffic layer. And from there, let's unlock the traffic layer. And let's put this over here, and over here, and over here. So now we have 4 different waypoints with the same instance variable. So let's actually put this one to number 1. Let's put this one to number 2. Let's put this one to number 3. And let's put this one to number 4. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to have the traffic find these waypoints one at a time. And when they do, they're going to reset themselves to finding the next waypoint. So what we want to do is we want to make a new event sheet. Let's call this our traffic events. And let's go to our game events and include it. Let's make sure we do that. And what we want to do is we want to double click and make a new sprite for our traffic. Let's actually import frames from file, and let's grab all of our cars and our motorcycle and hit open. Let's delete frame 0, and then let's actually hold down shift and put all of these to the right like so, and let's put the speed of this down to 0. So what this is going to do is it's actually going to allow us to make all of these cars face the right direction, and this way we actually have more control over where we want them to go. Let's actually put the angle, just like we did before, to 180. And instead of putting the car behavior, we're actually going to put the pathfinding behavior to this. Then what I want to do is I want to give it 2 instance variables. The first is going to be our inst, let's call this, we want to call this check WID, so check the waypoint ID. Then what we want to do is we want to add in our inst car health. Now I know it's kind of silly to give the car health, but hear me out. I'm going to show you a way that the car can be destroyed separate from the player, and that way we kind of have 2 different health to track from. So now that we have this set up, let's actually call this our object car traffic object. Let's actually do one more thing to it. Let's add the brightness effect to it. This is going to be something that we're going to do later for when something actually collides with it. Let's actually look at the pathfinding behavior. So we want to leave the cell size and the cell border the same. This is how it's actually going to detect it. And without kind of getting into it too much, we want to leave every single pathfinding behavior the same. If we ever had more than one, we want to make sure that they have the same cell size. We don't want to overload the computer, and we also just want to make sure that they're using they're using the same thing. And as it says here, smaller sizes will use more CPU, so let's just leave it the way it is. Okay, what we do want to change though is we want to change the max speed. Let's put this up to 450. Let's put the acceleration all the way up to 6,000. Let's put the deceleration up to 6,000. And let's put the rotate speed up to 1500, like that. Cool. Let's disable diagonals. We don't really need them. And we can leave this enabled. So what we did was we made this go really fast. Now, this is actually, it kind of looks good, fast and slow. This is going to do a full turn once it gets to the waypoint, but it's okay. I think this is going to show you everything you need to know about creating something like this. And in addition to that, it's actually just really cool to use the pathfinding behavior. So what we're going to do in our traffic event here is we're going to say if a car is created, because we are going to create these in a second. So on created, what we want to do is we want to tell the car traffic to find the path. We want to find the path to the waypoint, right? Object, did I call it waypoint? Yeah, I did. Waypoint.x, object waypoint.y. And what that's going to let us do is it's actually going to let us find the first waypoint .x and .y. And then from there, we have to tell it to find the next one and the next one and the next one. So what we're going to do this is we're going to add another event to the car. We're going to say if it's actually found the path, so let's type in path found. If it's found the path, then simply we're going to tell it to move along the path. So this isn't where our actual waypoints, where our car will actually start to move from point to point, but this is how we have to set this up. We have to tell it when it's created to find the path, and then when it finds the path, we have to make sure that it moves along the path. Then what we have to do is we have to say when it's arrived to the path. Now this is where we can actually tell it to move via the waypoint. So what we want to do is we want to check to see if this is overlapping a waypoint. And if it is, so if it's overlapping the waypoint, what we want to do is set the variable to check our waypoint ID to whatever that waypoint ID equals. So in this case, object waypoint.inst waypoint ID. So now this is going to actually find the waypoint ID and set it to the car ID. Once it does that, we need to actually tell it to actually, how do I explain this the right way? We need to do two things. We need to actually find out how many waypoints we have. So we're going to actually have to manually set that. Although technically we could come up with another way if we had multiple waypoints, or if you're doing something more complicated where you were just creating waypoints. What we're going to be doing is we already know that we have 4 waypoints, so we're going to make sure that it's checking at 4. So let's actually make that sub event here. So when it arrives to the path, we want to make sure that it's not going over the 4 waypoints. And to do that, we're just going to say if it's greater than or equal to, not less than, greater than or equal to 4. And if it is, then we're going to put it to 0. So let's actually go down here, set the value of this to 0. Since we start at 1 and we're not starting at 0, if we had put that to 1, it would actually bypass the first one. So we need to make sure that we put it back to 0 so it can kind of get a fresh start. Now what we want to do, and this is where this is actually going to move. If I were to hit play right now, this wouldn't actually move. We're actually going to do system pick by comparison. So it's going to pick the instance of an object that meets the comparison. So if this is meeting this, it's kind of a better way to compare two values, to compare an expression with an object. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick the object waypoint. We're going to find out what the waypoint ID is equal to. So we're going to say inst waypoint ID. Oops. Then what we're going to do, we're going to find out if it equals the car traffic dot inst ID. So we're going to find out if it equals the same thing, and then we're going to add 1 to it. And by adding 1, we're making sure that we're not going over or under. So by adding 1, then what we can do is we can tell the car to again, and actually I don't even have to add this again, I can just copy and paste this to tell it to find the path. So there we go. Now that we're finding the path again, this will continue to loop 4 times and it'll actually go around. So let's hit save and let's hit play and let's watch this happen. Now, if this is a little confusing to you, if you've never done the path finding behavior before, then you might want to mess around with it a little bit until you get it to your liking. But you can see already that this car is going to be coming around. So it's going to hit this waypoint, it's going to flip, it's going to hit this waypoint, it's going to flip, and the computer is going to be doing this every single tick. It's going to be trying to find and calculate the space between the 2 waypoints. So that is how we can kind of set this up. If this is kind of hitting the edge a little bit, what we need to do is we need to turn snap to grid on, and I'm going to need to make sure that these are perfectly aligned with each other. So let's put this one down here. Let's put this one down here and away from any place that I didn't want it to turn at. And let's hit play. So let's see how this looks. We can tweak this until it actually makes sure that it's going on the road. And when we actually switch sprites, it should go on the road a little bit more. If this one wants to go over a little bit and it wants to hit the corner of that, we can also put the origin to the center instead. Let's see. So that one kind of did a total flip around us. Let's put that there again. And that way, or let's put this one like that. And this should, and another way to test this out actually is we can actually go to our window size and we can quickly put this to 2560 by 1408. And we can actually see this whole thing without having to kind of check anything. It's kind of stuttering along, and I actually don't like that or know why it's doing that. So to fix that, let's just bump up the speed of this. Let's put the speed of this to, let's put the speed of this to 650. And let's see if that fixes it a little bit. Fixes it. It should. You know, it's still kind of stuttering along, and that's a little bit, Okay, so I restarted my screen capture software and I actually fixed it a little bit. I guess it was slowing it down. That's never happened to me before, so if you're having any issues with your pathfinding behavior that is not related to a screen capturing software, then let me know in the comments and I'll be sure to help you out. The one other thing that I did tweak while this was down, just to make sure that this was working perfectly fine, was I put the waypoints to make sure that they were completely centered in their columns and rows. So you can see that they're right along the edge of the road and they're all snapped to grid. I made sure that their origin was in the center. And I believe that that's what I was missing originally with why it wasn't lining up to the road. When we're doing waypoints and when we're doing the pathfinding, it actually goes from origin to origin and it rotates from there. I also moved this over by one little grid snap. And that's also made a difference to actually help it stay in the middle of the road. So if I hit play, we can actually see what it was intended to be. It's going to be a little bit fast because we put the rotate speed to be really, really fast. But there we go. Now we have our traffic. So we have one more thing to do with our car. And actually, before we even do that, I'm happy with this. I mean, you can see that there's a little bit of correction that the computer does here with actually hitting those waypoints. Like it'll dip down, dip up. And it kind of does it for all of them. So just mess around with your waypoints until you get it to be what you intend it to be. And if this goes slower, you won't even notice it. So we actually have more than one car here to add. And we're actually going to make it so that it'll create these objects at a certain amount of time. And it'll actually create the same object with a different car every single time with different speeds. So let's actually go to our game event. Let's hit double click. Let's make a new event. Say system every X seconds. Let's put this to somewhere like 8 seconds. Let me bring this up and let me actually group this as our group. What would we call this? I guess this is almost like our player car control. So not the most original title, but there we go. Let's put this in there. And every 8 seconds, what we want to do, actually before we enter in that action, let's go over here. We want to grab our position. So we're at 256 and 0. So what we want to do is we want to have the system create that object on the traffic layer at 256 and 0. And with it creating the object every 8 seconds, I can now get rid of this and put this into my bank layout and get it off of our screen. Cool. So now that it's going to create a new object every 8 seconds, we now have multiple cars. And to actually set them to be different cars from our object, different frames, we already put this down to 0. We need to actually randomize the frames when it is created. And we actually have the event to do this. So every time a car is created, let's go here. Let's set the frame to int random 0 because that's where it starts at through 4. So we might get some duplicates because there's not many numbers to randomize through, but we will get different cars. Another thing we can do is we can actually set the speed. So it's going to be different from the max speed. This will actually grab every single object in pixels per second and set the speed to int random. I believe I went from 450 and comfortable with going up to 650 like that. So there we go. Now we have a little bit more randomness to our traffic, and it just kind of adds to the overall game here. So what we're going to be doing later on is we're going to be making a way to actually stop these cars, not from moving, but just kind of destroying them with the car that we have and with our own weapon that we can fire. So there we can see it's going to create it every 8 seconds. It's going to hopefully create a different car, and it'll actually create the motorcycle as well, which will look pretty cool. So at least we have that in. What we're going to do now is we're going to add in our enemy AI just to kind of bring this together. Let's create our zombie on the enemies layer. Let's lock our traffic layer, go into our enemies layer. Instead of putting it on the bank layout for right now, we'll just put it here. Let's make a new sprite and let's import frames from files. Let's grab our zombie animations. Let's delete frame 0 and let's grab frame 1 and put it into its own animation. Let's call this ID gun. Again, we're kind of prefixing this with ID just so we can have it. We can have the option of animating it if we wanted to. So if you have animatable art and you wanted to make it walk, you wanted to make it do other things, then feel free to do so. So let's call this ID idle, and the origins should be the same. Let's double check the origin points. Make sure that they are in the middle. Double check the collision. Set it to bounding box, apply to all animations. And then let's go to our ID gun and let's give it the bullet image point because we're going to make our zombie shoot. Why not? Okay, so now we have our zombie. Let's call this object zombie. And let's add in the behavior of 8 direction, just like we did for our player. The only difference is we can leave this be. We can turn default controls off, so that way we're not controlling it with the arrow keys at all. And what we're going to do is, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that we want to add to this. Oh yeah, let's add the brightness effect to it, because we're going to be indicating if an object has been collided on and collided with. That's going to be our indicator in a bit. Let's add in some instance variables for the zombie. Let's actually add in the X position and the Y position, just like we would do for our global variables, but we're just going to grab them for every single zombie. This is good practice too if you have multiple enemies like we are going to have in the long run. You don't have to do this by any means. You can just use their X and Y, but I kind of like grabbing it. Let's call this inst health, and the only reason I'm not calling this is because I think it's easier to type out 2 letters than that. So we're adding health to our zombie. We're adding our X and Y. We have our 8 direction behavior, and we have our effect. Let's make a new event sheet. Let's call this zombie AI. Let's go to our game event. Let's add the zombie AI to it. Otherwise, it won't work at all. And let's actually set the health first. Let's say if the zombie is created, then let's set the value of inst health to equal int random. Let's give it 2 through 6. So they're pretty easy to kill. We want them to be easy. We want this whole thing to be easy. This is something that I think you can take to the next level on your own if you're looking to make a top-down game, if you're looking to make a top-down shooter game, or if you're looking to make anything that you want to actually have control. What we're going to be doing in a bit is we're going to be making our task system, which is basically just like a questing system. It's going to be very basic, but at the same time, you can expand on it to make a whole bunch of things. All right, now what we're going to do, now that we have every time it's created, every time an instance of this is created, it'll have random health either 2 through 6, so it'll be kind of hard or kind of really easy. We're going to say system for each zombie. We are going to set the angle of the zombie, not the position. We're going to set the angle of the zombie toward, let's go back, toward position PX and PY. So every time every time the zombie sees the player, basically it's always going to be setting the angle towards the player and it's after you. Then let's just set our instance variables. Let's set the value of EX to equal self.x. And let's set the value of EY to equal self.y. Now what we want to do is we want to hit B on the keyboard here, and we actually want to control the distance between the player and the zombie. So let's do that. Let's do it like this. Let's say system compare 2 values. Let's use the distance function, and again, this distance function compares 2 objects and calculates the distance between them. Let's grab the object zombie dot x, the object zombie dot y, and this is actually did I call it EY? Yeah, be for enemy. Let's grab those, and then let's grab our PX and our PY. And that way we're just grabbing every single individual zombie. Again, not something that you have to do, but something that might be good practice to do. Let's find out if it's less than 100 to start with. We're probably going to end up changing that number. And then what we're going to do, and this is where we're actually going to have the zombie set the position to actually trail the player. We're going to set the position here. So for every single zombie that is less than 100 pixels away from the player, we're going to set the position to lurk between the self.x position the player's X position, and 0.01. Anything faster than that, it's going to go way too fast. Then we're going to set is self.y, player y, and 0.01. And now we actually have the zombie following the player. With this line of code, we are actually letting the zombie chase us, and now we need to get away. We need to get 100 pixels away for it to stop. While it's chasing us, let's actually set the animation of the zombie. Set it to ID gun. Just like that. Now we're not done yet. We have one other thing that we need to do here, and that is we need to set up an else statement. And let's say if we do get away from the zombie, let's flip this back to idle. And we're actually going to make it shoot as well. But right now, let's just see this work. Let's hit save. Let's hit play. And let's move around. So you can see that it's setting the angle towards us every single time I move. But if I get 100 pixels away, it should get closer to us. It shouldn't freak out that much. And because it's freaking out that much, I have actually no idea why it's freaking out that much. Let's make sure that everything is the same when it comes to the origin point. It is not. Put this to the middle. Collision is the same. Origin point should be the same. Otherwise, it's going to freak out a whole lot like it just did, which is actually a very common problem. So now we can see that if I'm 100 pixels away, it's actually going to start to come closer to me. If I'm not, it's just going to kind of look at me like this. And that's the power of lerping. But this is kind of too close, right? So you can see here that when I get 100 pixels away from it or close to it, you can see that it pulls out its gun. But that's going to be too close. That's like a point blank range. We don't want that. So let's actually go back. Let's put this up to like 350. And that should actually make the zombie draw its weapon a lot sooner. There you go. Now I actually have some chance here to hide and get away from him if I can let him get stuck. And now he's going to put away his gun. There we go. Okay, cool. And also using the distance function is a lot better than using the line of sight functions, especially if you want to have multiple enemies. It's just less performance intensive. Now we actually need to make this guy shoot. So let's go to our bank layout here. Let's double click. Let's make a new sprite. Let's open, grab our enemy bullet, and let's put the origin of this to the left. Then what we want to do, call this object enemy bullet, even though it's our zombie bullet. Let's add the behavior of bullet, and then let's bump up the speed to like 800, and let's actually add the destroy outside layout behavior. Now this is something that I do for bullets because I want to make sure that they actually destroy. If you have too many bullets, you're going to have a lot of objects, and you want to be conscious of how many objects you have on your layout. Once you start going over 1,000 objects, things might slow down. I mean, your computer can handle a whole lot since we're developing this for computer, but you may want to make sure that you are keeping track of that. So for right now, even though we can go outside the layout and move around, and because we have unbounded scrolling to true, or no, we don't have that. I meant to do that. Let's do that. So if we hit play here, you can see that we're not scrolling past, and there's these black borders around it. And this is actually going to tie in pretty well. If I were to shoot the gun or a bullet or anything, if I was to have the enemy shoot a bullet and it goes outside this layout, we want to make sure it destroys. Otherwise, we are just going to create thousands of objects. Let's actually turn this to yes. And when I do, the entire game is going to be different. We actually have control over pretty much everything. And now you can see that we have a lot of space, but it doesn't really look good. So let's actually put the color of that background layer. Let's turn the background color, instead of it being white, let's select a color from the grass. And by doing this, it's actually going to create this seamless effect. It's going to make this look like it's an open world. And we can actually still develop over here. We can still put another tile map object over here, but we have to then get more intuitive with our programming and making sure that when we do spawn bullets, that they are destroyed at some point, whether they are going way too far, whether their distance traveled is too far, something like that. We just want to make sure that we do that. Otherwise, you're going to have too many objects in your project, and you're going to be wondering why it's slowing down, besides screen capture. Okay, so now that we have that, let's actually go back to our zombie AI and let's make it shoot. So to do this, let's make a sub event here. So if we have the distance, then there's nothing from stopping us. If our player's in our zombie zone, then we should have the zombie shoot. So let's double click on our blank sub event. Let's say every random, we don't need to make this integer. We could make it a float, but I think it's going to stay every random 0.1 to 1 second. So When we actually program our gun, one of the things that I've been doing is my own projectile system, and one of the best timing or rate of fire for a weapon is actually 0.09. And the step up from that would be 0.1. So by putting it just a little bit higher, and then when we actually do our weapon, we'll put it to 0.09, we actually have just that much advantage over our enemy. And by randomizing it between 0.1 and 1, if it lands on 1 second, then we really have the upper hand and it's not going to be creating as many bullets. So let's say system, create the object, enemy bullet. Let's create it on the enemy's layer, enemies. Let's create it at the object zombie.imagePointX bullet. And let's do the same thing, object zombie.imagePointY bullet. Now we're not done just yet. Because this is a top-down game and because this is actually going to just shoot the bullet at the point, we actually need to set the angle of this bullet. So let's go to our enemy. Let's set the angle, and we're actually going to use the angle function. So we're setting the angle, and then we're using the angle function to compare between two objects, just like the distance function. We're going to compare it between itself, .x and .y, and the player x and the player y. So now it's going to set the angle to be where it actually is and where the player actually is. So let's hit save here, and let's hit play, and let's watch as it should now start to fire bullets at us. And there we go. And it's going to fire it at a random amount of time, so we don't know what's coming. And if we hit this when we actually program in our health, it could really, really do some damage. The only other thing I want to change here is I want to go to our bank layout here, and I want to make this bullet a little bit bigger. Whatever I put this on, whatever I have the size of this, that's what it's going to create it as. So if I put this to like 32 by 16, that's how it will create it. And I just want this to be a little bit bigger so it's a little bit more visible when it shoots. There we go. I like that. Okay, cool. So now we have our enemy AI, we have our traffic, we actually have our car so we can actually drive away from the zombie altogether. Now what we need to do is we need to handle all of our collisions. We need to handle our player gun so our player can actually shoot. And we need to handle in our objectives. So we're going to be doing all of that in our next video. And we have a lot to do, but this is shaping up to be a really fun mini-series. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.